Welcome. Welcome to Julian Aguon Sneak Preview. My name is David Vine. I'm a professor in the Department of Anthropology at American University, and I do want to, I don't want anyone to worry, this will not be a manel, but I do, and we are focused here and most want to hear from Julian Aguon about his new book, The Properties of Perpetual Light. But we do also have a special exciting guest, the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at American University, Max Paul Friedman. Before I turn things over to him and then to Julian, most importantly, I do want to acknowledge the colonized land on which I stand here in Washington, D.C., and the Piscataway, Pamunkey, and Nacotchtank, or Anacostan peoples, and other indigenous peoples and groups who either currently or formerly have occupied this land. I want to acknowledge as well all the colonized lands that the United States government has colonized from here in Washington, D.C. to Guam, from which Julian is speaking to us tonight. Let me also just thank the co-sponsors of tonight's event, in addition to the American University College of Arts and Sciences, the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center, the Departments of Anthropology, Critical Race, Gender, and Culture Studies, Department of Literature, the Asian Studies Program, the Nuclear Studies Institute, Asian American Student Union, and the Hawaii Club. I also want to thank especially Jeannie Wogeman, Senior Administrative Assistant in the Department of Anthropology, the CAS Dean's Office, Haley Jardis in particular, Max Paul Friedman, Dean Max Paul Friedman, and the people who are providing CART captioning tonight. Let me then turn things over to Max Paul Friedman, our fabulous Dean and a dear friend.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the land acknowledgement with which we began. And thank you for the honor of introducing Julian Aguon, who is an indigenous human rights lawyer and writer from Guam, who at the ripe old age of 28 started his own law firm, founder of Blue Ocean Law, a progressive firm that works at the intersection of indigenous rights and environmental justice. He is deeply engaged in the struggles of peoples across Oceania to liberate themselves from colonial rule, defend their sacred sites, and obtain justice for a range of harms inflicted upon them by outside forces, from nuclear weapons testing and medical experimentation to extractive industries and the devastation of climate change. He serves on the Global Advisory Council of Progressive International and is an Asia-Pacific leader for the Obama Foundation. He also serves as legal counsel for the Guam legislature and special assistant attorney general to defend the right for native inhabitants of Guam to choose their political status. He is also a gifted writer. Alice Walker called The Properties of Perpetual Light a powerful, beautiful book. Naomi Klein said, "I did not know I needed this book until it had me in its embrace like the oldest and dearest of friends from the very first page." And Richard Falk said the writing speaks directly to the mind and heart of everyone on the planet. If reading this short book doesn't change your life, nothing will. Well, we are grateful to you, Julian, for taking the time today to change our lives. On behalf of the College of Arts and Sciences at American University, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Dean Max Paul Friedman, for your beautiful words. Let me just add a couple of a technical, logistical nature. We will turn things over to Julian and then have a question and answer period during which people can ask their questions verbally, or if they have questions throughout the evening, you could put them in the chat and I will be monitoring them. I'm also going to right now put in the chat a link to Julian's website and more information about his book, as well as a link to a nice website where you can purchase the book, which we encourage you to do. You can pre-order the book. They'll be available in March. I have read the book. It is a beautiful book. I highly encourage you to buy it for your friends, buy it for your loved ones, buy it for anyone you know. I should also say that we're particularly excited. The book is already #1 on at least 2 lists belonging to that Jeff Bezos website. I think it's called Amazon. Both indigenous biographies and the colonialism lists. The book, before it is even released, has already hit #1. So this is clearly a book that's going to make waves. I don't know if the pun is intended or not, but the size of the audience here tonight is also a reflection of that. And let me just lastly, say that there are many reasons why I really love Julian, and I've only met him in person a couple times, but he is so much and gives so much to the world, as a lawyer, as an activist, as a poet, as a writer, as a human being. He's someone who's unafraid to talk about things like beauty and love and magic. The more I read his writing, the more moving it becomes. One piece in particular that I would love to read now, but I won't, because we want to hear Julian read from his book, which I'll do. I will just read one of the last lines from a piece that ended a book called The Bases of Empire. Julian is, and the reason I came to know him, has been a long time activist in the struggle to demilitarize Guam or Guahan. Just for those who, like most of us in the 48 states plus the colony of the District of Columbia, often have a hard time placing Guam or Guam on a map. Here it is. And for those who don't know the extent to which Guam is militarized, this map shows how somewhere between 25% and 33% of Guam is occupied by the US military. At the end of Julian's conclusion to the book, The Bases of Empire, he says really beautifully, "From one activist to another, I lay flowers at your feet. Julian, wish I could be here with you in person to lay flowers at your feet, but I lay flowers at your feet for all the gifts you've given so many people around the world." So please take it away.
Wow. Thank you so much, David. And Max, thank you for that beautiful introduction. Yeah, I'm feeling really heartened by it. And I'm so happy to see so many people here. I hope you're all doing well. I sort of I was talking to David and sort of conceptualizing what this could be. And I was really insistent on it being something that felt relaxed, where we kind of are in conversation with each other in a deep way. I don't really want to speak too long. I'll tell you a little bit about the book and what sort of why I started writing. And I'll read a couple pieces, maybe one or two. But other than that, I really wanted to open it up to conversation. I'm totally and ready for questions. I just wanted it to feel a little bit more collaborative because yeah, I myself am tired of Zoom and I'm tired of talks. So I'm sure you folks are too. So yeah, I hope this could be something just a little bit more special. So yeah, with that, I'll begin. So 2020 obviously was a difficult year in so many different respects for so many different people, and David, you have this admin part down, right? I keep getting these admit people alerts. Okay, great. That was Kathy Lutz, by the way, from Brown. She's great. And we all work together on this sort of same collective struggle against the spreading canopy of militarization together. And that's how we all met. And actually, that brings me to the origin of this book. Last year, amidst the COVID-19 pandemic and everything else happening all around the world, it really brought home for me personally and for my people in Guam, just how militarized we are as a colony, as an American colony. And it became, in some ways, too much to bear for me. And I had a lot of rage about a variety of things that were happening. I'll just give you a few examples. There was a situation involving multiple ships. One of I guess the most famous one being the USS Theodore Roosevelt. And there was there were sort of basically, I would say, a lack of communication between the US federal government, the military, and the local government of Guam. Several US military personnel were running around the island, just spreading disease, flouting the rule of law, not basically ignoring all of the executive orders that our government had passed to try to, maximize protections against certain things, and all of them were violated. And so we saw a rapid, I think, can you hear me? Oh, yeah, I think in a roughly 1.5 month period, like maybe just over 5 weeks, our infection rate spread over 400%. It was just madness. And I had a lot of sort of rage about that experience. And basically, I told myself I had to put the rage somewhere. I could not let it swallow me whole, So I tried to quiet down all of that noise, and other people, of course, can be very noisy. So I tried to quiet down all of that noise and start writing. And also, you should know, I had a little bit of time, which is also rare. I run a very busy human rights practice. We work across the region. We work on self-determination issues here in Guam, in the Northern Mariana Islands. We have worked with a variety of people on everything from extractive industries to climate change. And so we're always busy, So sometimes it feels like we lurch from one crisis to another, barely with enough time to think. So this was really rare, this moment for me. And I told myself, don't waste it. So I just started writing. And when I began the process, I had no real idea what I was doing. I had no preconceived notion of what I wanted to write. I just knew that I had to write. It was different. It felt like a need. So I started writing, and what came out of me was spectacularly surprising. I had no idea that I would write essays about losing my father at 9 years old to pancreatic cancer. I didn't set out to do that. And then the more I wrote, the more I was realizing I was writing about everything from the beginning of my experience as a human being on this planet. So I wrote about losing my father, what it did to my nuclear family. And then, of course, I journeyed all over. So I also found myself recalling sort of a variety of experiences in all sort of stages of my life. I went to Gonzaga University. I lived for a while with friends in Spokane, Washington, which is an interesting place. But I also wrote an essay about meeting Sherman Alexie for the first time in a Spokane bookstore called Auntie's, and being too nervous to go up to him. And then that led me into a whole long side discussion about the Me Too movement in a footnote. And that's probably another thing you should know about this book. I really tried to use footnotes rather differently. I did not want them to be academic, and I did not want them to be full of, either snobbery or distance. I really wanted to eliminate all distance between the writer and the reader. I wanted us to feel like we were in the same room, over a meal. And so I shared rather personal things in all of the footnotes. I have embarrassingly personal footnotes about my love for Arundhati Roy, for example, being extreme. And so that was funny. But all of these footnotes, actually, my attempt was to trace the arc of the morally strenuous spirit that drives so many writers to take pen to paper. This sort of art of the art of the writer activist is the art of bearing witness. And what does that look like? And so I have a piece where I sort of reflect on the difficulties I had dealing with the fact of volunteerism. So I worked for Mother Teresa when I was a teenager, and I wrote about that experience and struggling with just questioning certain things about global relief efforts, at least when those relief efforts are divorced from any analysis of the causes of that poverty, and other things that make certain global relief efforts problematic. And so the book in some ways has a little bit of anarchy in it. In some ways it's hard to describe because it is so much a collage of my own lived experience, but I believe that as a writer is my work to do. I really wanted to try to call, the light from my own life, to try to, glean some insight that could be useful in particular to young people who are reaching for their words and finding that they are not there. We oftentimes reach for language, and we reach for language to set ourselves and others free. And sometimes it's not there. And so I wrote about that experience as well. I'll just end here with this note about fighting words. It's a commencement speech. So the book also has a eulogy for the Marshallese, great Marshallese statesman and hero and second father to me. His name was Tony DeBroom. He fought so hard for nuclear justice and climate justice on behalf of the Marshall Islands, but on behalf of the world, really, was hugely influential in the lead up to the Paris Agreement and the High Ambition Coalition. So all of those things. And that's what the book does, if that makes sense. Like, I tried to take the biggest things head on: nuclear contamination, like a leaking dome in the Marshall Islands, climate change, and being on the front lines of that as Indigenous Pacific Islanders. But I tried to write about those big things by inverting my gaze. Does that make, now I'm talking to you. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, because I think that was the point of the book. I wanted to try to say big things, but I wanted to say big things by focusing on small things. I just, obviously the very smallest of things are connected indeed to the biggest of things. And I tried to really prove that thesis, so many of the essays where I talk about losing my father, I also know that my father worked at Inner Apra Harbor, Guam's only deep water harbor here. And I know that he worked for the SRF, ship repair facility, and he was a pipe fitter at one point. And I know that several of the people who have worked in that site have died of cancer, and including rare cancers. Like one of my best friends, Elisa Natividad, her mother also worked there. It was her birthday yesterday. So we talked about that and the connection about losing our parents. And her mother had uterine cancer, mine had pancreatic. And we talked about just like the absolute concretization of what contamination does. So the last thing I'll say before I start reading is, if I can say anything at all, I would say that this book deploys one insight: the feminist insight that the personal is political. I would say that's precisely what the book does. I hope that makes sense. And so, yeah, I will read you two pieces. The first one is a very short piece. It's called Mugu. And it is one of those pieces that I'm writing in some ways with a younger voice. It's sort of me reflecting as an adult on my childhood self and what I was going through at the time. This piece is called Mugu. They say if you take the mugu from a dog's eyes and rub it into your own, you can see the dead. They lied. I know, because I tried after Dad died. Rubbed more mugu in my eyes than I care to admit. And that's not the crazy thing. The crazy thing is I didn't have a dog, so I settled for strays. Chased those poor dogs all around the neighborhood. Because beggars can't be choosers. Because desperation, like belief, is a powerful thing. And because I was 10 and I could not yet put 2 and 2 together. I somehow thought if I could see my dad, I could speak to him too. Ask him all my questions. Do you like heaven? Are you and God friends? Do you miss us? Do you miss me? Do you still have a body? Is it chubby like before cancer or skinny like after? What's your favorite food? Mine is cheese. Is yours? Is that because Saka, our family name on your side, means rat? What about Aguon? My teacher said Aguon refers to the family of tubers, as in taros and yams. Why is tuber such a weird word? And how are we related to taros and yams? How exactly? Can you help Mom? All she does is walk around sad and cry in that scary way where she shakes but don't make no sound. Also, she faints a lot. Also, can you help Ria? She don't talk no more. She don't laugh. It's too quiet in the house. Can you come back and make it noisy again? I chase those poor dogs for nothing. I never saw him, never got to ask him all my questions. The medical term for mugo is room, a fancy word for eye gunk, the crust that collects in the corners of our eyes sometimes after a good night's sleep. A natural part of healthy eye function, doctors say, nothing more. But then, doctors don't know everything. So yeah, that's just one of the pieces that are, shorter. Yeah, so I will read you, now I'm winging it because I was gonna read you something else, but now I've changed my mind. I'm gonna read something else because this actually gets to some of this I would say is what I'm about to read you now. It's longer, and I would say is one of the more sort of openly political pieces, if that makes sense, where it's a little bit more direct, but still from a very particular point of view. One sip of coffee, hold on. This one I wrote right after joining the Progressive International. We are a global collective that launched in May 2020 in order to mobilize people around the world around a shared vision of social justice. This one is called No Country for 8 Spot Butterflies. In Guam, even the dead are dying. As I write this, the US Department of Defense is ramping up the militarization of my homeland, part of its $8 billion scheme to relocate roughly 5,000 Marines from Okinawa to Guam. In fact, ground has already been broken along the island's beautiful northern coastline for a massive firing range complex. The complex, consisting of 5 live fire training ranges and support facilities, is being built dangerously close to the island's primary source of drinking water, the northern Guamlands aquifer. Moreover, the complex is situated over several historically and culturally significant sites, including the remnants of ancient villages where several thousands of years old, where our ancestors' remains remain. The construction of these firing ranges will entail the destruction of more than 1,000 acres of native limestone forest. These forests are unbearably beautiful, took millennia to evolve, and today function as essential habitat for several endangered endemic species, including a fruit bat, a flightless rail, and 3 species of tree snails. Not to mention a swiftlet, a starling, and a slender-toed gecko. The largest of the 5 ranges, a 59-acre multi-purpose machine gun range, will be built a mere 100 feet from the last remaining reproductive Hudson Lagu tree in Guam. If only superpowers were concerned with the stuff of lowercase earth, like forests and fresh water. If only they were curious about the whisper and scurry of small lives. If only they were moved by beauty. If only. But the militarization of Guam is nothing if not proof that they are not so moved. In fact, the military buildup now underway is happening over the objections of thousands of the island's residents. Many of these protesters, including myself, are indigenous Chamorros whose ancestors endured 5 centuries of colonization and who see this latest wave of unilateral action by the United States simply as the latest course in a long and steady diet of dispossession. When the US Navy first released its highly technical and 11,000-page long draft environmental impact statement in November 2009, the people of Guam submitted over 10,000 comments outlining our concerns, many of us strenuously opposed to the military's plans. We produced simplified educational materials on the anticipated adverse impacts of those plans and provided community trainings on them. We took hundreds of people hiking through the jungles specifically slated for destruction. We took several others swimming in the harbor where the military proposed dredging some 40 acres of coral reef for the berthing of a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. We testified so many times and in so many ways in the streets and in the offices of elected officials. We even filed a lawsuit under the National Environmental Policy Act, effectively forcing the Navy to conduct further environmental impact assessments, thus pushing the buildup back a few years. But delay was all we won, and the bulldozers are back with a vengeance. A $78 million contract for the live fire training range complex has been awarded to Black Construction, which has already begun clearing 89 acres of primary limestone forests and 110 acres of secondary limestone forests. It's bitterly ironic that so many of these machines bear the name Caterpillar, when the very thing they are destroying is that precious creature's preciously singular habitat. To be sure, such forests house the host plant for the endemic Mariana 8-spot butterfly. But then, again, maybe a country that routinely prefers power over strength and living over letting live is no country for 8-spot butterflies. While this wave of militarization should elicit our every outrage, indignation is not nearly enough to build a bridge to anywhere. It's useful, yes, but we need to get a hell of a lot more serious about articulating alternatives if we hope to withstand the forces of predatory global capitalism and ultimately replace its ethos of extraction with one of our own. In the case of my own people, an ethos of reciprocity. And nowhere is that ethos more alive than in those very same forests, for it is there that our Zu'omti, our healers, are perpetuating our culture, in particular our traditional healing practices. It is there on the forest floor and in the crevices of the limestone rock that many of the plants needed to make our medicine grow. It is there that our medicine women gather the plants their mothers and their mothers' mothers gathered before them. These plants, combined with others harvested from elsewhere on the island, treat everything from anxiety to arthritis. As someone who suffers from regular bouts of bronchitis, I can attest to the fact that the medicine Anti-Francis Areola Cabrera Meno makes to treat respiratory problems has proven more effective in my case than any medicine of the modern world. Yet Anti-Francis, like so many other Zu'omti I know, takes no credit for the cure. As she tells it, to do so would be hubris, as so many others are involved in the healing process. The plants themselves, with whom she converses in a secret language, her mother, who taught her how to identify which plants have which properties, and also how and when to pick them, and the ancestors, who give her permission to enter the jungle and who, on occasion, favor her, allowing her to find everything she needs and more. More than this, she tells me that I too am part of the process, that people like me who seek out her services give her life meaning, that she wouldn't know what to do with herself if she wasn't making medicine, that the life of a healer was always hers to have because she was born breech under a new moon and thus had the hands for healing. But such things are inevitably lost in translation. And no military on earth is sensitive enough to perceive something as soft as the whisper of another worldview. Earlier this month, I received an invitation to serve on the Global Advisory Council for Progressive International, a new and exciting global initiative to mobilize people around the world behind a shared vision of social justice. So of course I said yes. Truth be told, I know little by way of details. What kind of time commitment are we talking about? How will we work as a group? Who else said yes? But I am ready anyway. Ready to build a global justice movement that is anchored, at least in part, in the intellectual contributions of Indigenous peoples. Peoples who have, that's my dog. Can you hear him? I'm almost done with this. This is embarrassing, but real life, so I'll go on. Peoples who have a unique capacity to resist despair through connection to collective memory, and who just might be our best hope to build a new world rooted in reciprocity and mutual respect for the earth and for each other. The world we need, the world of our dreams. This same world who, on a quiet day in September, bent down low and breathed in the ear of Arundhati Roy. She is still on her way. So that's the second piece. And of course, my little Shih Tzu is wearing me out right now. Oh yeah, so those are the I think the two I wanted to share with you all today. Yeah, and I think we have just under half an hour left. So I really wanted to, I guess, open it up to David first to talk about sort of like to be a bridge here, or to just get right into it. I'd love to be in conversation with you all.
Julian, thank you so much. That was so beautiful, including your dog joining in the chorus, I think cheering you on, as someone said in the chat. Why don't we open things up to questions from anyone in the audience? If you have a question, could you please use the raise hand function in Zoom at the bottom of your screen? I should also, at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see the closed captioning. I apologize that it started late. That was my fault entirely for not assigning the closed captioner, not the fault of the fantastic closed captioning people. Apologies for that. Again, if you have a question, please use the raise hand function and then I will unmute you. You can also use the chat box to ask a question and we will let you, and I'll read your question for you. But I think we see here, we have our first question. Laurel, if you could unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me? Oh, great.
Yes.
Thank you for those readings, Julian. Those were very impactful. I felt both of them very strongly. It sounds like your book came from a very, very personal place. And I was wondering, when you think of an audience for this book, do you, in your mind, is it other Indigenous folks? Like, is it Chamorros? Is it non-Indigenous folks? And what do you hope either audience or a third or fourth option that you might have, what do you hope they will receive from your work?
Great question. Thank you so much for it, Laurel. Yeah, I struggle with that question because if you catch me on any given day, I sort of switch my answer because I think the book has pieces in it that speak to different audiences. Of course, I, being an Indigenous Chamorro person myself and a lawyer who often litigates and fights on behalf of my own community, I feel obvious like deep love and affection is one of my truest and most enduring impulses is to fight for my community. And so this book is absolutely for them, but it's absolutely for all Micronesians as well. So I have this whole piece in the book where I even talk about the delicate state of race relations among Chamorros and Chukis. And I talk about I actually have a whole like a long piece about Micronesians and Micronesia, because this region, I talk in that piece I just read about this long and steady diet of dispossession. In fact, it's a diet that's been shared by our brothers and sisters in our fellow Micronesian states. The Marshall Islands, for example, was the subject of intense nuclear bombing from 1946 to 1958. And the effects of which are ongoing. I mean, and it's not just nuclear testing, but non-consensual medical experimentation, also legal issues that we work on. But I see it for them. I see it for, and I especially see it for young people too, as a category that sort of goes beyond those two. Because young people everywhere, there's so many pieces, like the Sherman Alexie piece, where I struggle with various feminist themes in like a 4-page tight little piece about books and literature. And so there's also, so I see young people as this other huge grouping that's really transnational, clearly, because I think a lot of what I write about in some ways it's very particular to me, but it's very universal to be a young person and to, lack any swag, to have like just no confidence, to just be like having all your words just sitting right there, but they just can't get out, and I just write about those kinds of moments and I encourage young people to, and so actually if you read the introduction of the book, I actually directed at young people everywhere. So that's it. Thank you so much, Laurel.
Thank you indeed, Laurel. And Nicholas Mahanik.
Hi. So the question I had for you, Julian, was, fighting these battles, you're fighting a lot of very large institutions, like the U.S. government, the U.S. military, and also in situations where the law is often very not in a favorable position. You have a lot of obstacles to overcome to get relief. And so I just wonder, how do you stay so positive and so motivated when you're fighting all these battles that you're going to put a lot of effort in something you believe in, and at the end of the day, a lot of times you're just not going to come away with success. How do you keep going and stay so positive in light of that?
Hi, Nick. It's nice to see you. So to answer your question, I actually talk about this in another piece of the book called My Mother's Bamboo Bracelets, a handful of lessons on saving the world. And I actually talk about lawyers in particular, right? Like we are learned to revere and respect the elegance of restraint, so, and we also in law school and our legal training, we often pick up this reflex that it's better to only fight the fights we can win, or to lawyer in the narrowest possible nook, and so I write about the importance of fighting the fights that need fighting. That's the point. I mean, I think another answer to your question is that I'm in community with people. I think that's a very important point. I never feel isolated. I never feel like an island. I feel like I have a beloved community and we are in this together. And we are like, whenever something else happens, like in Guam or in Micronesia or in the wider Pacific region or in the world, I feel like I so easily connect with that beloved community. And oddly enough, I feel like even with sort of all the sort of calamities that we fight and that we're facing, I really feel my beloved community stretching so far. Like, I mean, I'll tell you, like Alice Walker wrote me once. I mean, it's not just that she wrote a blurb and I'm so grateful that she did, but she wrote me once after having visited Zora Neale Hurston's grave, another writer that's so epically important, who Alice did so much work to uplift and to dig out, because too few people knew about her, and she's a genius of the South, and we don't throw our geniuses away. That's what she was saying about that. But when she wrote me from that, we had this such an intimate exchange, and I was like, wow, this is really happening. This, like, when you're really doing this and you're sort of fighting these fights with people, it almost becomes natural and so much easier. I mean, there's increasing ease, and the beloved community grows and you feel inspired by each other's victories. Like, for example, I have worked with Jennifer Robinson, who's on international lawyers for West Papua, but she's also Julian Assange's lawyer. There's like different kinds of things, but there's also lawyers that she works with. And so I was introduced to the whole like struggle in the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, for an advisory opinion about the United Kingdom's wrongful claim to, basically Chagos should not have been detached from Mauritius. I mean, there's a whole thing about this, but it just happened in 2019. And you have the highest court, the principal judicial organ of the United Nations saying, hell no, pump the brakes. This is so wrong and categorically illegitimate. And then we now have the International Tribunal of the Law of Sea, just like a week ago or whatever, like it feels like 5 minutes ago, just further confirming that UK has no sovereignty over Chagos. And that felt like an unwinnable battle. A lot of these battles, when we start them, they feel too mammoth and too unwinnable. And I think that's what's so great about being strategic. And that's the one thing that I appreciate about the legal training, the ability to take that war and then to, cut it down, to just keep cutting it down into bite-sized battles and then winning them one by one. Being really strategic about that. And I'm all about that, but at the same time, I'm still a poet, I'm a writer, and I'm really sick of how the law, like other institutions, has been so captured. It's so pathetic. I mean, no offense, like our profession, so it's attracted too many whack people. I mean, and they don't believe in anything. They don't believe the world can be changed. There's like a crazy amount of cynicism in certain young law students. I'm like, wow, you haven't even lived yet. How are you this cynical already? Cynicism, like hope, should be earned. Wow, I think that was a little passionate. I'm a passionate person, but yeah. Is that Amanda? Hi.
I think it's obvious why so many people love Julian. Keep up the passion. I hope I don't mispronounce this, Rokin. If you can unmute yourself.
Hey, can you hear me?
A little bit.
A little bit? Is this better?
A little bit, yeah, go for it.
Really hear. I can't hear it.
Rokeen, maybe you could type your question into the chat box and I'll read it. We're having a little trouble with the audio. Maybe we can move to Kira Wadsworth and then come back to your question if you don't mind.
Sure. Thank you.
Kira, if you can, yeah. Please.
Hello. I'm having some trouble with my video, but I'm happy to be here. Hi, Julian.
Hi.
So my question is, whenever I talk about a lot of the issues on Guam to people here in the States, I have a really hard time getting really negative about the military in general. And I, never mean to belittle the experiences of veterans or, what they've gone through. And I'm curious about, your view on, on how to speak about it without attacking, only the military, I guess.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your question. I actually think the answer is much easier than you think. I mean, we're pointing out structures here and systems. I mean, I am systemically attacking the U.S. military when I'm attacking the military. This has nothing to do with individual service members, because I'm attacking the fact that so many of our policymakers actually falsely claim that there's no money for anything. Oh, there's no money for Medicare fraud. Oh, there's no money for the Green New Deal. There's no money for that. But we got $700 billion for the military. We got that. Like, no, so it's hella whack. I'm sorry. Now I'm getting super just into this. Yeah. But basically the idea is it's almost like, racism. It's like sometimes when, we have all these like exercises that so many good facilitated like trainers do, when they're talking to people about white supremacy and entrenched privilege. And we're talking about all of these like really complicated systems, but they're huge structures. And it's important to talk about how you basically, this is not about individuals. It's never about, racism is not about individuals. It's not about individualized prejudice. It's prejudice plus power. That's the difference. Like, so even like, yeah, so like, it's sort of the same. I think you can sort of use the same set of skills when you're talking about, no, this is not about you having one Black friend. This is about racism, which is prejudice plus power. I think it's the same way with the military. I think we need to do a better job because I get it too, Kira, and especially when you live here. Wow, I mean, it's really, some members in the community are hyper militarized in their imaginations, and they're sort of unable to logistically make that switch. And they're like, oh no, we're actually critiquing lots of big things, like policy things, and everything about, like, for example, like if you're gonna critique, when you make your critiques or you engage in conversations with people, like point out the fact, like the numbers, and actually you should point out the sort of pattern of waste on the part of the military. And you should point out the large systemic problem of the military as a polluter. No, and then the connected to the climate change conversation. These are just easy ways in some ways to just make it not about individuals, but about systems. I hope that helps.
Oh, definitely.
Maybe we can try Rokeen again. I didn't see your question in the chat, and we did hear you at the very end. So maybe try again, unmuting yourself and.
Okay. Hello. Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Awesome. Hafaday, everybody. It's so great to see so many other like Chamorro faces, and Julian, just really appreciate you sharing your passions and your work. My question goes to you, Julian, in that, many people I think can be aware of so many issues, and so many people either dismiss it or, they feel so defeated before even putting up a fight. And so I just want to ask you, like, I'm sure you had many moments, but what was one moment in particular that you felt a call to action?
Oh my gosh, can you be more specific? Sorry, Rikin, because I have like tons, I don't want to go crazy. So, but in terms of Guam, in the Guam context?
Whatever you feel, whether it's in your personal life, in your work, I feel like sometimes these moments of inspiration, or just when you say like, fuck the world, I'm gonna go for it anyway, like find all those negative voices, just really shooting for the stars. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one time, for example, I think I remember there's stories about our elders in our community. I remember Uncle Tony Sablon being held at gunpoint. I remember Auntie Kathy McCullum on the back of her pickup truck with all her pride and all her love and all her rage. Wow, I'm like kind of getting emotional. But yeah, so all of those things, like when you see your elders disrespected, it's hard to take in a way that is very specific because you see injustice all around you, like we do in Guam. It's in some ways like a little bit of despair and a little bit of futility. These sort of impressions, these feelings are sort of like our meat and drink here in some ways. And so seeing elders though, in particular, being in danger or in harm's way or being mocked. I have a piece in the book where I write an entire entry about a particular flower on Guam. I won't read it here, but basically it was actually written on behalf of Judy Wampat, who was just a local policymaker who tried to do something as simple as change the official flower, from the invasive bougainvillea to the native gausali, and was mocked viciously for it in the local press. And I was like, wow, this is something else. And I couldn't handle it. So like those are the moments when I realize, like, a lot of times when our elders are being disrespected, I get sort of catapulted into action. Just as a person, those are my sensibilities. And then probably the other thing is when I see it on the opposite end, when really young people are mocked as well. Like I've seen very young, in their teens, people try to hold gatherings and organize protests here on Guam, and they were mocked by the middle-aged like policymakers and people in power and the Chamber of Commerce, which is pretty relentless here. And I was like, and that also catapults me into action, just because I just can't take people, lording over power over people with less power. Like that is just not, that is the thing, right? And it's instinct. I want to say that straight up, it's instinct. I think we don't even really validate our intuition enough. I think I built my entire law firm around intuition and relationships. Those are the two things that have propelled me this far in life. And I would encourage all young people, if they ask me directly, I believe trust your gut, and be good to your friends.
Sanamasi.
More beautiful advice. Before I turn things over to Joy, let me just read a couple of the comments and questions that have come in through the chat. There have been an outpouring of love and affection for Julian, including, "This is so healing." Someone who pointed out that they didn't know they should bring a box of Kleenex to the talk, but I think they are not alone there. Beautifully written. And then a comment from Barbara Ween. "My heart is full from this session. So many of us are working to end militarism around the world, particularly here in the US. We can give each other strength and are more powerful than we realize. Julian, I hope you'll share your new book with the Pacific Storytellers Cooperative and artists like Kathy Jetmill Kitchener." And there's a link. I will, with that, also put the link to Julian's book again to encourage people to buy this fabulous and beautiful book. But Joy, please unmute yourself.
Aloha, Julian.
Aloha.
So proud and happy for you. This is just such a great moment for you. And I love how eclectic and so fuck it, you went for it. And that's how we do. We put our truth out there in the ways that it comes. And so I think I really want to applaud that decision, which I'm sure was a great struggle with your publishers in terms of order. But my question to you is, you clearly draw from a Black feminist, like a Black feminist, abolitionist framework. And it's key to your book, it's key to your work. And tell me, can you share with folks why that's so critical? And as you know, this is very close to me, why that's so critical in Oceania, in particular to D-Mill work in the Pacific?
Yeah. Joy, thank you so much for that question. That's a great question. I mean, and also, I guess the short answer is the Pacific region is not immune to the sort of like virulent anti-Blackness going on in other corners of the world, and including the country. And so like so I think that is important, centering some of that framework, because so much of our sort of critical movements rely on the literature produced that, I mean, even legally speaking, the critical race studies movement. So much of my legal frameworks and analytical frameworks are borrowed from those traditions. And I think that's really powerful. And it's good to be hella explicit about it. So in the book, I actually there's a whole Q&A in the end where I'm talking about my love of Black women writers in particular. For example, the commencement speech Fighting Words came from a Black woman sociologist named Patricia Hill Collins, who I read and she rocked my world in undergrad. And I had an amazing teacher, Jane Reinhardt, who taught sociology, and I immediately changed my major to like sociology and women's studies, And so Toni Morrison in particular, she once said that the function of racism is distraction, and it's distracting us from doing our real work. And when someone said, what is your real work? Again, Toni says, your work, she said, our lives are already artful. They're just waiting for us to make them art. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm doing with this book. It became very clear. I was like, I'm going to, pull from my own life experiences and try to, find call light from them. And I try to use them and deploy them. So in some ways the book is exceedingly feminist, Black feminist. It's a womanist book, really. Womanism being feminism color, the term coined by Alice Walker in her book, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, Womanist Prose, which is still among my top 10 most influential books of my life. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
Got a thumbs up from Joy. Just a few other comments that have poured in. Lots of congratulations. How did you get to be so fabulous and fierce? But seriously, where do you find your strength? And how are you able to rise above the disparity and say, fuck this? And also you're fabulous and fierce. But we have someone who needs to go in a moment to a faculty meeting. Apologies if I mispronounced your name, but Migetu, if you could unmute yourself.
Afadetelu, dankulu nasi dus masih magas pada neguta dan melati. Afamala gomu selu pada famaguan guaha na gupa sa merkanu ti malagu ajuda ifamaguan legna fagmata famaguan mobmu malagu mobmu hafamala gomu na famaguan selu. I thank Brother Julian for his strength and he has no fear and his intellect. And I asked him, what does he want for our children, for their tomorrow? What does he want for our people who are always told to sit down? What does he hope for them for tomorrow?
I'm so sorry. I heard everything you said and I turned it off because my dog was chewing. God, this is
Gofat katsa yiga lagu telu.
I know. So, God, honestly, it would mean a lot to me if this book, to answer your question, it would mean a lot to me if this book really did help our young people realize that they can and should take up space in the world. There's something about our children here in Guam. I mean, I've said this before, but I feel like we can describe colonialism and the effects, the adverse impacts, of what being a colony is. But to me, this is how I would describe it. Colonialism is the sense, colonialism is like, if it looks like anything, it looks like dreams under duct tape. Because I think I see our young people do that, even if they'd never call them that. They take their dreams and they put them in boxes, and they seal them shut and they shelve them somewhere just out of sight, and I think that's what colonialism looks like. And I see it in young people here all the time. So I hope that this book inspires them in a real and concrete way where they think that, yeah, they too can take the light of their own life. They too, can make art from their lives, and take up space and be more confident and feel more empowered and feel like they have like an older brother at their back, if that makes sense. Thank you. And thank you for coming.
I think some of us might need a second box of Kleenex. Other comments pouring in. Thank you for producing a book that feeds the soul and challenges us all to build a more just world. One of the most positive people I've ever met from someone. Kirk, can I ask you to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Julian, for this space and for sharing. I'm hoping that maybe you can speak to some of the university students that are on the call, and maybe even high school students, younger people, and maybe share how you approached your engagement with higher education before law school, right? And how you conceived of your summers and what kind of spaces and opportunities and that you wanted to put yourself in. And of course, our life experience locally and regionally, internationally shape our thinking, our passion, our heart. And there's a very powerful piece in the book that speaks to one of those spaces that you put yourself in. Thank you, Julian.
Thank you so much, Kirk. Yeah, so when I was in college, I did, you know, I was really craving just different experiences. I mean, and partly I want to actually start by saying, you don't really love home, at least not in the really like robust way that, like, at least in my own experience, I didn't really even realize how much I could love my home without leaving it first. You know, like you have to have the contrast. You have to see, you know, you have to experience other things to understand, you know. So for me, a lot of the work that I've done as a lawyer, as a writer, just as a community member and organizer has been all post-college, precisely because I came home having had that experience and realizing just how special home is. But yeah, when I was thinking about college, just to be frank, I didn't have much money. And I really needed a way. So like I tried really hard to get as good grades as possible. But I don't think any of that was it. I don't think my good grades did much. And my, you know, what is that test that you take? I'm so used to the law school test, but what is the younger test? Is it SAT? Is that what's wrong with me? SAT? Okay, the younger test. And I was like, I don't think that was it. My score wasn't even terribly high. So I know how I got in. It's writing. I always fall back on that same sort of like gift or that same sort of skill set. And I think that's my saving grace. When I was young, I wrote an essay about, you know, being part of this community and bearing my father. And I tried to talk about, about bearing too many people from cancer. So it goes back to what I said in the beginning, you know, about there's just such an alarmingly high rate of cancer here in Guam. So I wrote about what it means to be a young singer, because I used to sing. And to sing at a disproportionate number of funerals when I was young. And so, yeah, so I think I would tell young people now applying for college, for example, the university or the high school students on the line, that, you know, try to, again, it's sort of doing what I'm saying to do with the book. Try to look at your own life and dig deep, like really deep, and try to figure out what moments in your life are really formative. What would not the fake ones, or I had an experience or something, but the deep ones, the ones that made you struggle, the ones that, you know, you're afraid to look at. You know, those are the things. I mean, if you can write from that place, the authenticity of that is really powerful and compelling. And I think that's what speaks to like people, for example, in admissions, other than test scores, right? So those are the things that speak to people admitting to higher ed. At least that's the hope. And then once you're in college, yeah, for me, Kirk is alluding to the fact that there's an essay about my time in India working for Mother Teresa, but also, yeah, and I wanted that experience. So that whole experience was really transformative too. And it wasn't just the sort of working for Mother Teresa in her home for the dying and destitute. You know, my jobs were sweeping the floor, you know, serving people food, changing bandages, different things. And I was really young and questioning a lot of that, but that was a really enriching experience. But it was also because I lived in a Tibetan refugee camp at the same time, and I would get to work from there. So it was also the contrast experience with like so many different Tibetan people, including different monks, and learning about their religion. So all of those things, Kirk, I think for young people, I think you're right that travel. I think that one of the first ways to grow a global heart is to let it break into hundreds of pieces. And I think that heartbreak it matters. And I think Alice Walker actually writes about that. She was like, when she was first delving into Buddhism, she was talking about how, you know, compassion grows from, you know, pain. Like, and when we have these experiences, we can observe them, and our grief can either like isolate us, or they can bring us together. Our grief can bring us together. And I think that's, you know, what you learn over time. But I tried to help young people with this book by talking about that really openly, about grief. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer, but it had a sort of many working parts to it.
Again, a beautiful answer, and that line about the need to grow a global heart, or the need to let your heart break into hundreds of pieces to grow a global heart is one of many that will stay with me from tonight. We're getting other comments. Everyone who teaches should require this book in their classes, says Sarah. Thank you so much for this beautiful gathering, and it's Julian for all his gifts. Maybe I could ask a question, and again, if others have questions, please raise your hand. We'll go for at least a few more minutes. There's such enthusiasm. I would hate to cut it off, and I know I want to hear Julian speak more. But if you'd like to ask a question, do please use the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen, or type your question into the chat. Julian, I wonder if you might want to speak a bit about what the decolonization movement means in Guam. Here in DC, there seems to be growing momentum to make DC a state. Whether that comes to pass or not, we will see. I certainly hope so, as one who now resides in another of the colonies of the United States. But I wonder if you might, there's been less attention to statehood for Guam, for example, or independence. So I wonder if you might speak about what people who don't live in Guam should know about the decolonization struggle in Guam.
Sure. Self-determination is the fundamental right of people to be free from colonial rule, first and foremost. And so Guam is one of 17 UN-recognized non-self-governing territories. That means we're formally slated for an act of decolonization. We're technically on a list, and we're just waiting to be, to exercise self-determination by having a decolonization vote, a plebiscite. You should know that effort that chapter has recently been closed in some ways by the US federal court system. So in 2011, a white plaintiff who resides in Guam filed a lawsuit claiming that the Guam decolonization registry law violated the 15th and 14th Amendments to the US Constitution and the Voting Rights Act. And what was essentially the use of civil rights law, these Reconstruction amendments, the weaponization of them, in some ways to then obliterate the space for a purely symbolic plebiscite vote among the native inhabitants was foreclosed. The Ninth Circuit agreed with the plaintiff's argument, and the US Supreme Court denied cert. So what that means now is that the government of Guam is in this weird quandary where it has to consider, do we amend the definition? Do we allow every single person who resides in Guam to vote in this political status plebiscite? Even people who have resided here as short as 30 days. And it's wildly problematic precisely because the right of self-determination is the cure. But it's a cure for a very particular harm. That harm is colonization. So if you're not part of the colonized class of persons, it's really quite absurd. In some ways, it's a reimposition of colonization through legal means. Sorry, that was a very legal answer. I also have that hat on right now, but that's the precise way to state what's going on. But also, just to be clear, I think part of the problematic distinctions with DC, for example, I have a lot of people who are even our progressive saying, oh, let's just give statehood to the rest of, pump the brakes is what I say and what many activists say, because Puerto Rico's that's not what this is about. It's about self-determination. It's the right of the peoples to freely express their will. And so I have a huge problem with people, the imposing of, this like one size fits all kind of framework for all of the territories. It absolutely doesn't work. And that's precisely why the people of American Samoa, another sort of colonized place by the US, many of the people in American Samoa on the ground have told me that they emphatically, vociferously oppose, the imposition of US citizenship against their will. And so certain nonprofits, are promoting, there's a certain line of cases that actually people in American Samoa find wildly problematic because they're not asking, for use. So the imposition of anything against the people's will is the exact opposite of self-determination. So I just want to say that. So for Guam, what the Davis case means is that we have what it means is that the US is saying we no longer have a right even to have a purely non-binding symbolic first symbolic step toward decolonization. I mean, we can't get in a voting booth and vote for statehood, independence, or free association. We can't even have that symbolic vote. And I think the fact that this kind of case was the fact that these legal arguments were being advanced under the banner of civil rights is as repugnant as it is shameful. I hope that is clear.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Julian. Question came, will people have access to this recording? The answer is yes. I will post it on my Facebook page. Julian will have access to it as well. And I think we're going to try to put it on the website of the Department of Anthropology at American University. Another question came in, a couple more questions. One in the chat, it's a big question. And I sense you can take it in any direction you want. Julian, what's your first memory?
Oh my gosh, actually, I think I know the answer to that, because normally I would say, how the hell am I supposed to know that? But just kidding. But actually I do. It immediately popped into my head, and I think this is my first memory. It's being in a bathtub of ice with my father. When I was a young child, very young, I was prone to having these episodes where I developed an extremely high fever. And so I guess the treatment at the time, wrong as it was, and I'm not sure, but was to dunk the child into like a bathtub full of ice and icy water. And so I actually remember shivering. I remember my dad would be in the water with me, holding me to bring my fever down, you know, and like, this is just what he knew at the time. But actually I remember being in a bathtub and looking up at him. And I haven't thought about that in years. So that's a great question. Yeah. So it's really fitting, actually, because so much of the book returns to my own childhood grappling with what that particular loss meant in my life.
Isaac, if you could unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
You can, please go
Okay,
ahead.
awesome. Hello, Julian. First, I'd just like to say thank you for being an inspiration to all the young storytellers here on the island of Guam. As a communication major at the University of Guam, part of my studies revolve around studying the art of writing and storytelling, specifically through film and mass media. So my question for you is, what advice do you have for us young storytellers who want to be writers in the future and want to make the art of writing our profession?
Wow, that's a great question too. I guess my instinct is to tell you to take it very, very seriously and write every day, like write all the time. I mean, like if you really are certain that that is where you want to end up, that that's what you want to do with your life, I would practice the craft. I think that's like the first step. I think I would write all the time. And a secondary step would be to seek out a mentor whose writing you actually like or you know, want to emulate, for example, because like there's so many gifted writers who write so many different kinds of genres. So like if you are writing primarily things that might lend themselves to a career in investigative journalism, I would seek out a mentor who writes sort of from that angle. But if you wanted to be, for example, like a fiction writer, you would seek out a fiction writer mentor. I think that's really important. I think mentorship is really important. Yeah, especially because writing can feel so isolating. It's like I think some writers refer to it as the tyranny of the blank page. You know, so, you know, you're like, wow, I don't even know where to start. And so writing can be really demoralizing in some ways when you're like alone with it. So I would seek out a mentor for sure. And I would write all the time.
So another question that came in that sort of echoes that in a way. Can you talk about the book's title?
Sure. The book's title is really a meditation on death and dying. I talk about being in Guam and being a child and my parents having dragged me to more rosaries than I can remember, just because most Chamorros are a Catholic here in Guam. And so we have childhood, even if you're not Catholic yourself, you're surrounded by Catholicism for sure. And so like there's this, during the nightly rosaries, because when a loved one dies, we descend upon a family member's home or the village church to pray for 9 nights. And in unison, we say, you know, may they rest in peace. Well, we're talking about the dead, and then we say, let perpetual light shine upon them, may they rest in peace, right? So that's a Catholic prayer for the dead. And I was like, but this meditation on just death and dying in particular, and what I think that really that passage means, And so, and really, I was talking about how The Alchemist was a book that formed me in some ways. And it talked about how The Alchemist tells the boy that those who are interested only in gold do not understand the secret of alchemy, for lead, copper, and other have their own destinies to fulfill. And anyone who interferes with the destiny of another thing will never discover her own. And I was like, wow, this is a really interesting way to look at it. Like, do the spirit, do in the same way that the earth metals have distinct properties, what about their spiritual counterparts like hope and faith? So I actually have a meditation on the properties of perpetual light, so yeah. When you if you read the book, you'll see it all laid out in the introduction. But David, I think according to we have time maybe for one more question, and before that transition group.
I think there's a really good final question that came in the chat. Are there still ways for us to stop the destruction of the rainforests, coral reefs, and stop the transfer of so many troops to Guam? Can ordinary citizens join lawsuits? And I guess I would just add on to that, are there any other places you would direct folks who want to be supportive of any and all of the struggles that you were involved in Guam and beyond?
For sure. So we recently filed a submission to the UN Special Rapporteur on the rights of Indigenous peoples on behalf of a community-based organization led largely by young Indigenous Chamorro women. That organization is called Perpetual, or Save Ritidian. I would immediately get online. I would find out more about them. They're led by, there's multiple members of this group, but I would say the clear leaders are Maria Hernandez, Jess Gauta, and Monica Flores, and they are great. And they have so much passion and they work on this all the time. And I would direct all of my energy towards supporting the work of that community group on Guam. Again, they're called Pertehi Latexan, Save Ritidian. And maybe we can put some information on the chat, but I would just research them and I would direct resources or any assistance with them. And lastly, to answer your question, oh yeah, I think we're not giving up yet without a fight. And someone mentioned lawsuits. I mean, obviously we can continue to explore them. We filed under NEPA, for example, but we haven't filed under the Endangered Species Act or the Clean Water Act. We can determine if there's an existing cause of action under any of those, and then we can move forward. But so many different people in the community are working on different portions of it. But yes, I think you will see that there's still a resistance movement that is alive and well.
Just because some people hopefully have seen in the chat, but in case you're watching later and won't be able to see the chat, Prutehi Litekian is PRUTEHILITEKYAN, or Save Ritidian, RITIDIAN. Julian, I lay flowers at your feet once more. I am so in awe, as I think everyone here tonight, the well over 125 people and I think the thousands who will see your book, and hopefully tens of thousands, if not more, who will get a chance to read your book, the thousands who will get to see this video, I hope. So thank you. I'm going to unmute everyone. If everyone could give Julian a round of applause in just a moment. Let me hold on. Okay, everyone now has the power to unmute yourself. Please do, and join me in giving Julian an applause.
Thank you.
Mahalo nui loa.
Viva Guam.
Viva.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you, David, for bringing this to our campus.
Thank you all so much.
Hafadai to all my friends in Guam.
It's so good to see everybody's faces. Hi, everybody. Hi, Yvette. Hi, Michael. Hi. I've seen so many faces of people I know. Wow. Eileen, my god sister.
I'm gonna. think. Julian, I'm trying to, oh yeah.